Everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Helena Nett. I'm the Executive Director with the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce. Very excited about this webinar, Protecting Yourself and Your Team. On behalf of the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce, representing 30,000 different business and civic leaders, we are always providing webinars, seminars, in-person meetings to help you grow your business. And this is one way of protecting yourself and your team. We're really excited today to have this webinar go on. Walter Peretti, he is the Office of the Advocate, the Associate Workers' Compensation Examiner, and he is a 30-year veteran with the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. So we're really excited to have his presentation, his expertise, and his knowledge. So what we're going to do is he is going to do the presentation, and then we're going to have a Q&A afterwards. So let him go through the presentation. If you have any questions, put it in the chat. That's what the chat is there for. I'll be monitoring the chat. This will be on Chamber TV. We'll make sure that it gets on sometime within the next day or two. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Walter. Walter, we so appreciate your time. And on behalf of the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce, we realize how important the information that you have gets trickled down into the hands of the businesses. So we're really excited about this and how important protecting yourself and your team is. So I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks for having me, Helena. Today this presentation is entitled Protecting Yourself and Your Team, the Coverage Essentials for Businesses. Again, I'm Walt Peretti from the Advocate for Business Office. Today, we're going to go over some of the coverage basics, who needs coverage, who doesn't need coverage, the cost associated with getting coverage, as well as the penalties that are assessed if you do not have coverage, how to control some of those costs for your businesses, and also, some safety tips as well as loss prevention, what to do if there's an injury, and how to report that. And then we'll conclude and we'll have some resources for you, numbers to call, email addresses to reach our office. And also, any questions that you might have, as Helena said, just put them in the chat as you kind of think of them. Generally, the only people that can see the questions are myself, the host, and Helena. So don't be embarrassed. No question is too small or insignificant. We'll answer all of them. And, so if you have anything as it comes up, just put it in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we'll get to it. Okay, so what is a workers' compensation board? We were created in 1914 after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory that occurred down in Manhattan in 1911. Many immigrant women and child workers were killed basically in sweatshop conditions when they were locked in to this garment district shirt factory. We receive reports of injuries. We also receive reports of payments, and we authorize medical providers to treat workers' compensation claimants. We have approximately 1,050 employees. Actually, we just had an all-staff webinar a couple of weeks ago, and I think that number, as of a couple of weeks ago, was 1,066. We have offices statewide, so we're in the Schenectady office, the Advocate for Businesses, and we have offices in Buffalo, up in Plattsburgh, down in Manhattan, Brooklyn, out on Long Island, et cetera. And we also hold hearings to adjudicate any disputes. So if you're injured on the job and there's any question as to whether it's a compensable injury, as if it happened on the job or not, et cetera, you would go before a workers' compensation law judge, and that person would make that determination. Okay. So the Advocate for Business Office, our office is led by our Advocate for Business, Anthony Tomaselli. Some of the stuff that we do, we assist individual businesses with coverage and compliance issues. As we are doing today, we work to educate business owners as well as government personnel on the workers' compensation system. We regularly meet with business associations and employer groups and listen to their concerns regarding the system. And our office reports directly to our chairperson, Frida Foster. So we can bring any concerns back to her if we're hearing a common theme amongst the business community as far as pain points within the system or things that might not be working so well. We can bring those complaints back to her, and perhaps, the board can look at some changes either in their rules or through the legislature to make the system work more smoothly for everybody. So what is workers' compensation insurance? Workers' compensation insurance covers any type of on-the-job accident, injury, or illness. So whether you're at work today and you hurt your elbow, or you're working in a setting where you might be breathing in air that's caused you to become ill, etc., that would be covered under workers' compensation. All right, provides medical, all medical costs. So if you were under the treatment of a workers' compensation doctor, you'd never pay any type of co-payment, lab fee, testing fee, etc., for the life of that claim. And it also provides wage replacement. So if you become ill or you're injured to the extent where you are unable to work, you could collect indemnity benefits, wage replacement benefits, and that's at a maximum of 2/3 of the average weekly wage in New York State, which is average weekly wage in New York State is about $1,800 a week. So if you made more than that, $1,800, you would collect 2/3 of it. Otherwise, you just collect 2/3 of your own average weekly wage. And it's there to protect both the employer as well as their employees. Okay. Disability benefits, that covers anything that happens off the job. So tonight, if you go home and you're raking some leaves or cutting your lawn or gardening, etc., and you were to hurt your back or something, that would fall under disability benefits law. You have to be under the care of a physician or a medical professional. There's only limited wage replacement that's provided with that, and no medical benefits. So hopefully, if you were injured off the job, those medical bills would be picked up by your health insurance carrier. All right. You have to file a claim within the first 30 days of becoming disabled, and you can receive wage replacement up to $170 a week for up to 26 weeks. As Helena noted, I've been with the board about 30 years. When I came in, the disability wage replacement was $170 a week, and it's still to this day $170 a week. So it hasn't really moved up anywhere in the last 30 years. And you can collect that for a maximum of up to 26 weeks. Okay. Paid family leave came about in 2018. It's there to provide job protected paid time off for employees to bond with a new child, whether that's through the birth, adoption, or foster care. Care for a family member that has a serious health condition, or assist when a family member is deployed abroad on active military duty. Okay. So who needs coverage and who doesn't need coverage? We're going to cover all these examples in terms of, when a business needs coverage or when an individual needs coverage for workers' compensation, disability benefits, and when they don't. Okay. Workers' compensation is a day one insurance. So if you're starting a business and you're hiring employees, you would need to have coverage from the moment those individuals start working for you. All right. With disability benefits, there's a little bit of a lag. You have to have that policy in place 4 weeks after the 30th day of your employee's employment. So you have almost a full 2 months. But workers' compensation, if you're going from being a sole proprietor to hiring somebody, whether that's a full-time person, part-time person, you have to have coverage from the day that individual starts working for you. Okay. So how do we define an employee? We don't look at, how you pay the individual or, from a tax standpoint, we don't look at any of that. We say that anybody providing any services to a for-profit business can be determined to be an employee of that business. Okay. And that includes a family member, a part-time, a student intern, etc. And then any compensated individuals that are providing services to a non-for-profit can also be determined to be an employee of that non-for-profit. And there's some limited exceptions, such as clergy or teachers are exempt if it's a 501c3 setting. Okay. Who's not required to carry workers' compensation insurance? So if you're a sole proprietor, you're one man, one woman operation, you have no other employees working for you, whether it be part-time or full-time, you're exempt from having coverage. Partners in a partnership that have no employees are exempt from having coverage, and that is unlimited. It could be 2 partners, could be 7, 10 partners, etc. As long as they have no other employees, everybody working for the business is a partner in that business, they're exempt from having coverage. And then 1 or 2 person-owned corporations with no employees. The caveat with that is if it's a 2 person-owned corporation, each individual has to hold office in the corporation. And between the 2 of them, they have to hold all offices, and they each have to own at least 1 share of stock. And between the 2 of them, they have to own 100% of the stock. So if it's a situation where there's a third officer, a president, a vice president, a treasurer, 3 different people, one of those individuals would be considered to be an employee, and that would trigger the need for coverage for that particular business. LLCs, if the only people compensated are members of that LLC, then they would be exempt. Just like the partnership, there's no limit on the number of LLC members. Could be 2, 3, 10, etc. So those individuals would be exempt if the only people were members of the LLC. In all these instances, it's important to point out that these individuals can get the coverage. So if you're a sole proprietor and maybe you're working, as a roofer or plumber, and you're just working, you're a one man, one woman operation, you can go out and get the coverage, in which case, obviously, you would be covered for workers' comp. And should you become injured, you'd have that medical care as well as indemnity benefits if the injury reached the point where you're unable to work for a period of time. And as well as that goes for partners, 1 or 2 person corporations, LLCs. The philosophy kind of behind the law, or the thinking, is you can kind of assume that risk for yourself, as far as saying, okay, I'm a sole proprietor, I'm exempt. I'm not going to get the coverage. If I get injured or something, I'm just going to, plow through it, or suck it up, so to speak. But you can't assume that for somebody else. You can't say, well, my employee is not going to get sick. So once you have an employee, that triggers you needing to have coverage. But as far as if it's just you yourself, you can always exempt yourself. Okay. PFL coverage. All right. Can an employee waive it? It's not optional for most employees. All right. Some part-time or seasonal employees can qualify for that waiver. And only if they regularly work fewer than 20 hours per week and won't work 175 days in a year. So we always like to use the example as some type of seasonal employee. So like, a landscaping business, maybe they're just going to be working June, July, August, et cetera. And there's going to be fewer than 20 hours a week. Or if they work 20 or more hours per week, but they won't be in employment with that employer for 26 consecutive weeks. Again, if you're, maybe your son or daughter's home from college, they, working for a landscaper for those 3 months that they're home or out of high school, et cetera, for that summer break. If it's going to be less than 26 consecutive weeks with that same employer, they can exempt that coverage, right? PFL coverage is paid for by the employee unless the employer decides to pay for it, whereas workers' comp disability benefits are essentially paid for by the employer. So, some employees might want to exempt it thinking like, I'm not going to need time off to bond with a child, or my family's relatively healthy. So I'll save myself that $7 a week and waive my PFL coverage. Okay. As far as workers' comp, disability, and PFL for sole proprietors and other self-employed individuals, they can voluntarily opt in for coverage. If they opt in for that workers' comp or disability, they're eligible, to take advantage or take workers' comp or disability benefits coverage from the moment they opt in. If it's PFL, if they opt in within the first 26 weeks of starting their business, so about 6 months, there's no waiting period for those benefits. If they delay opting in till after 26 weeks of starting their business, they have to have a 2-year waiting period before they can take advantage of PFL benefits. Excuse me. Okay. Independent contractors. We get this question in our office, in the Advocate for Business office, a lot. What's an independent contractor, as far as whether that individual is an employee? So some of the factors that we look at, all right, does the hiring business control the time and manner in which the work is to be done? Okay. Are they, telling you when to come to work, what time you're working to, et cetera? Does the individual have a separate FEIN number from the Internal Revenue Service, or do they file their own business tax returns? Okay. So the example sometimes uses, obviously, if it's a restaurant situation, the cook, the dishwasher, the wait staff, they're considered to be employees. All right. They're participating actively in the business. They're integral to success. They have a schedule. The owner of the restaurant is telling them, what shift they're working. Okay, we need you here Friday from 4 to 10 for the dinner shift, et cetera. But if that same restaurant went out and they had an issue with their stove or their plumbing and they called the plumber in, that individual would be considered an independent contractor and would not be covered under the restaurant's workers' compensation insurance. Does the individual maintain a separate business establishment from that hiring business? Again, back to that, hiring a plumber to come fix your stove or dishwasher in a restaurant situation. They have a separate business establishment. There's more information on this in our employer section of our website at wcb.ny.gov if you had more questions on how to determine if an individual is an independent contractor or an employee for workers' comp purposes. Okay. Construction workers. We give this presentation and similar presentations a lot to general contractors, building professionals, etc. So under the Construction Industry Fair Play Act, which is a Department of Labor Act or law, workers are presumed to be an employee unless they can prove they have their own business. All right. And there's more information on that on DOL's website, Department of Labor's website, at dol.ny.gov/Construction Industry Fair Play Act. Okay. So general contractors are liable for all workers' compensation claims of any uninsured subcontractors. So we always recommend that as a general contractor, you make sure that all your subs have a policy and that you get a copy of that insurance certificate from those subcontractors, and it names you as a certificate holder on their workers' compensation policy. That's important for two reasons. One, as a certificate holder, should something change in that policy, they cancel it because they didn't, or they get canceled because they didn't pay their premium, or their insurance carrier cancels them for some reason, maybe underwriting purposes, etc. As that certificate holder, you'll get a notification that, Walt Peretti Painting LLC had their workers' compensation policy canceled on May 14th for non-payment of premium. And then you can go to that subcontractor and say, hey, you gave me the certificate. Now I just got a notice from your insurance carrier that you've been canceled. What's going on here? Also, it's helpful from your own business perspective in that you will be charged premium for any payments you make to uninsured subcontractors. But if you can prove that those subcontractors were not uninsured and you have that insurance certificate and you can show that to your carrier when they do their annual audit for your premium, they will not charge you premium on what you've paid to those subcontractors. So for those two reasons, one, a cost savings to your own business, and two, to protect your own business from having an unwanted claim, you want to make sure that any subs you have, subcontractors, that they have their own policy and they name you and your business as a certificate holder on their workers' compensation policy. Okay. How are premiums calculated? All right. So every job in New York State has a 4-digit classification code. Those job code classification codes are maintained by the Compensation Insurance Rating Board. Obviously, the class codes in labor intensive fields like roofing, construction, etc. Restaurant cook, dishwasher, warehouse worker, etc. They are going to be more expensive to insure because they have a higher rate of injury in the workplace. The rates are $100 per $100 worth of payroll. So the more payroll you have in each classification code, the more premium you're going to pay. And then also, just much like your car insurance or your homeowners, have you had a lot of claims in the last year or 2 years? How safely are you operating your business? The carrier again comes in and does those audits on an annual basis to look at your payroll and determine your premium for the year going forward. And then there's approximately 238 insurance carriers licensed to write business in New York State. You have your large private carriers, the Travelers, Hartford, State Farm, etc. You also have the New York State Insurance Fund. They're a quasi-state agency. The only type of insurance they sell is workers' compensation, disability benefits, and paid family leave. So those insurance carriers, they compete on price. And they have administrative expenses, right? How well do they take those premiums and invest them? How well do those investments do? How big of a staff do they have? What's their overhead? So as a business owner, you want to make sure that you shop around. If you go through a broker, that individual can, shop your policy around to several companies. You can go online and get from the New York State Insurance Fund, you can get a quote right online. It's a pretty quick process. Or, you can call the Travelers, Hartford yourself if you're not dealing with an agent or broker, and look at the policies and talk to them about, what's the best bang for my buck. And compare prices just as you would with any type of insurance you buy. Workers' compensation insurance is statutory. So that means essentially that whether that coverage is with the Travelers, the Hartford, or the New York State Insurance Fund, the policies are all the same. There's no Cadillac of coverage, so to speak. They all pay all the medical, and they pay out the same in terms of indemnity benefits. So whether you buy the policy from the Travelers or the Hartford, you're getting the same exact policy. Maybe the customer service is a little bit better at one place than the other, or maybe you know the agent that works for State Farm, et cetera. But you do want to, as a business owner, you should look into comparing costs, across different carriers and see what your options are. Disability benefits, that's also calculated per $100 worth of payroll. There's no class code in this case as far as the disability benefits. It's essentially how many female employees do you have? How many male employees do you have? And there's a rate for female employees, which is a little bit higher than the rate for male employees, because when a female goes out on maternity leave, that she can collect disability benefits. So therefore, there's more claims made by females than there are males. So the rate is a little bit higher. For disability benefits, you can collect 0.5% of the employee's wages, which is up to no more than 60 cents per week, to help offset the cost of providing that disability benefits insurance. The employer would pay the rest. Paid family leave, when that was rolled out, that was meant to be at no cost to the employer. So it's completely paid for by the employees, unless the employer decides they want to pick up that cost for their employees. So you may deduct the full contribution from each employee. The rate for 2026 is 0.432% of their gross wages, capped at a maximum of $411. So it's costing the employee about $8 per week to have that insurance. Okay. Some of the non-compliance penalties. This a lot of what our office does, the Advocate for Business office. We're a small office. A lot of what we deal with is when an employer has been assessed in a penalty because they do not have coverage and they had employees for a period of time. So the penalties that are assessed are up to $2,000 for every 10 days of non-compliance. Comes out to $72,000 a year. Up to 5 employees is a misdemeanor, which is subject to a maximum $5,000 penalty. More than 5 employees is a Class E felony, subject to a maximum of $50,000 penalty, and 1 1/3 to 4 years in prison. And then misclassification, if you're reporting to your carrier, class codes that represent a lower premium than what those workers are actually doing, that's the same thing as being uninsured. As far as those class codes go, they will be assigned by your insurance carrier. You generally don't have to worry about that, or your agent will walk you through, and say, okay, you have this much payroll, in roofing, you have this much payroll on the administrative side, this much payroll in sales, et cetera. And they'll come up with those class codes. So that's not something you generally have to worry about. But at any point, you can look up those class codes. Again, they're maintained by the Compensation Insurance Rating Board. So if your business changes, or you feel that, the classification code they have you in doesn't accurately represent what those employees are doing, feel free to look up those codes or talk to your agent or broker or your carrier directly and have that conversation with, we automated a little bit, so the employee's not moving and lifting as much, et cetera. We feel like this, this class code doesn't actively represent, what our employees are doing in this day and age. Disability benefits, paid family leave, non-compliance penalties is 0.5% of your payroll, the employer's payroll, during that period of non-compliance. It's a misdemeanor, subject to a fine of $100 to $500 in prison, or $100 to $500, then imprisonment for up to 1 year, for any additional violations, et cetera. Again, what our office does, we work with businesses to lower these penalties, especially on the workers' compensation side. That $2,000 for every 10 days it's a lot for a small business, a lot for any business in this day and age. So what we do, if you are found to have a penalty, we ask that you get the coverage if you still need the coverage. So you go out, you get yourself a policy. Once that policy is in place, you would send our office a copy of that policy that shows the amount of premium you're paying. And then we'd work off any potential penalty off of that premium. So we're not going to charge a small business that has an annual premium of $1,500 a year. We're not going to charge them $2,000 for being out of compliance for a 10-day period. We're going to look at what makes sense there, what's reasonable, et cetera, what the circumstances were, and then look at that premium and work any type of penalty off of that. Right. There's also the debarment. law. That came about a while back. And basically, if you are found to not have workers' compensation disability benefits coverage for any period of time, excuse me, you're barred from bidding or being awarded any type of public work contract or subcontract with the state or any municipal corporation. So whether that's a county, you know, a village, a town, a city, you cannot get any type of permit, license, or contract. So if you need a food service permit, you know, from Onondaga County or Queens County or New York County to get, you know, to operate your restaurant, you would be ineligible to get that permit if you had a lapse in coverage and you were on that debarment list. And you go on that list for a 1 year period. And the ban is 5 years for any type of felony conviction. So that's, you know, another reason if you want, obviously protecting your business and your employees, but, you know, if you get any type of government contract or permit, you want to really make sure you keep that coverage in place, you know, without any type of lapse, or you will end up on that debarment list. We do have an appeal process. So again, if you're penalized, you'll receive a letter from us. It's general inquiry letter. You just want to make sure you react to that letter right away. There's directions on the letter we send on how to respond to that, you know, online. You can even email our office. I'll have that email for you, slide for you in a little bit. Or you can call us directly and, you know, explain what the circumstances were or are. And you want to make sure that you appeal that right away, not let it go down the road, because eventually, you know, we do file a judgment against the business if they are non-responsive to our letters. Okay. Some of the ways that you can control costs through safety and loss prevention. Make sure that your carrier is using those correct classification code. Make sure you file your claims and stay informed, and that you're operating your business safely. There's also a labor management safety committee that you can form. It's a pretty simple process, kind of informal. You have an equal number of members, both from labor and management. You regularly rotate the chairperson of that committee, and then you meet regularly and have an agenda. And that could be a monthly meeting, quarterly meeting, etc. Some of the tasks that labor management safety committee can do, they can visit the workplace, they can review the equipment, sites and procedures, establish safe procedures, and train existing as well as new employees for safety. Okay. New York State Department New York State Department of Labor also offers a free on-site consultation program. It's totally confidential, so they're not there to report you to any other government agency. You know, they're not looking for other types of things. It's a voluntary program. They don't issue any type of penalty or fine. They send OSHA trained staff to visit your workplace and help mitigate any safety risks that you might have there. Some of the services they will do are site hazard assessments, you know, make sure the building looks safe, the doors are working properly, etc. Areas are marked, the floor isn't slippery. They also do air and noise sampling. Again, it's a free and confidential program offered by the New York State Department of Labor. If you want to take advantage of that program, you can give them a call and get more information on it, or even set up that appointment at 518-457-2238. New York State Department of Labor also offers a workplace safety and loss prevention incentive program, which is Code Rule 60. Businesses voluntarily establish a safety, drug, alcohol prevention, or return to work program. You can save up to 10% on your workers' compensation insurance in the first year and up to 6% in the second and third year. So if you establish that program year one, for the safety program, it's 4%. Return to work, it's at 4%. Drug and alcohol prevention is an additional 2% in year one. So savings of up to 10% that first year, and in those next two subsequent years, 6%. There is a little bit of a cost to that. Okay, you have to hire a certified specialist to do that. You can ask your insurance carrier about that program, Code Rule 60, or you can visit Department of Labor Workplace Safety Loss Prevention. They have a list of certified specialists that you can take advantage of those. They have model programs, so maybe you can find a business that is somewhat like yours and see what type of program they instituted. There's also additional resources and links as well on their website regarding Code Rule 60. Okay. Return to Work is a program. It helps workers get better and get back. A quick and safe return to a healthy lifestyle helps employees get better. A lot of the research shows that the longer that employee is out on workers' comp, the less connected they feel to the workplace, and the less likely they are to return. Especially, just 50% of employees will return to work after a 6-month absence. So you want to kind of keep in touch with that employee. If you can offer them some type of light duty, that's always a good idea. If they can't do their old job, maybe they have some type of light duty work that they can do on either a full-time basis or part-time basis, depending on what their workers' compensation physician says. They might be released to be able to do light duty. You can kind of keep that individual connected to the workplace so they feel part of something, and they're more likely to return once they heal up. They can also come back under reduced earning benefits if they return to work at a lower pay rate because their injury or disability prevents them from working at that pre-injury level. And then medical care for that work-related injury or illness is a lifetime benefit. So even after they return to work, if they're, need follow-up treatment on that particular injury, that's there, for the rest of their life. That injury is covered for the rest of their life. Any subsequent medical care that's related to that initial injury. Okay. So what do you do if you do have an injury? All right. You want to make sure that worker gets the necessary medical care right away. All right. Just record the details about the incident. What happened? Where did it happen? When did it happen? How did it happen? You're going to want to notify the insurance carrier if the illness is going to cause lost time beyond the date of that incident, okay, or if it requires medical treatment beyond ordinary first aid. So if it's a simple first aid, maybe somebody just cuts their finger a little bit, gets a small burn, they go home for the day, you give them a bandage, or they get that initial treatment of first aid, you don't have to make a claim, okay? But if it's going to require medical treatment beyond that first aid or lost time beyond the day of that actual incident, then you would have to file that claim. The worker would file the claim form. It's Form C3. It's right on our website. They file that with the Workers' Comp Board with us. And they have to notify the employer in writing no later than 30 days after that incident that they have filed that claim. Okay. Can the employer challenge a claim? Generally, you would just ask your insurance carrier to challenge that claim. All right. So, and then the insurance carrier would make that decision. But if you think for any reason that injury did not occur at work, or if you didn't employ that worker, you definitely want to reach out to your insurance carrier and say, hey, this gentleman or this woman never worked for me. I never heard of this person. I got a notice, for a hearing on a claim. You definitely want to tell your insurance carrier that. Or if the claim was fraudulent, maybe you laid that person off, in April, and they filed a claim in May saying they were hurt, May 5th or something, and they weren't even working there at the time. You'd want to bring that to the attention of your carrier, and the carrier would make the decision as to whether they want to challenge that claim with the board. Continued payment of an injured employee's wages. Some employers will continue to pay the employee's wages following a work-related injury or illness. If you do that, you can seek reimbursement for those wage payments out of any subsequent compensation awards. You just have to make a claim for reimbursement prior to that award of compensation. So if you continue to pay that employee while he or she is out on workers' comp, you can seek reimbursement for those wage payments out of any award that they receive. Okay. When that injured worker does return to work, you want to notify the insurance carrier immediately that he or she has returned. If they're performing limited or light duty with reduced salary, they may still qualify for some wage replacement benefits. That return to work that we talked about, if they come back in a light duty situation, they can still qualify for wage replacement benefits. If they return to their old job at the previous wage, they're no longer entitled to wage replacement benefits. And workers who return to work without disclosing it could face fraud charges. All right. Medically necessary treatment for a work-related injury or illness is a lifetime benefit. So even after that, employee comes back full-time at their old position under their previous wage, again, they would receive any type of follow-up care related to that workers' comp injury for the life of the claim. All right, some resources we have for you as an employer. All right, your responsibilities. You're going to get a poster from your insurance carrier. It's a C105. It basically tells your employees that you have coverage. This is what to do in case of an accident. You'll hang that poster, in the break room, or an area where employees congregate so they can see it. You want to make sure to report any type of claim in a timely manner. If there's a workplace injury or illness. Okay. And then section 120 of our law states an employee cannot be discriminated against for filing a claim. So you can't fire somebody, or, punish them for filing a workers' compensation insurance claim. Okay. They can only be terminated for a valid business reason, such as misconduct, insubordination, lack of work, absence from work, inability to perform the job, or a poor job performance. All right. And employees are eligible for workers' compensation, disability benefits, and paid family leave, regardless of their citizenship and or their immigration status. Okay. If you were in the area during the 9/11 attacks, you may be eligible for no-cost health care or financial compensation from the federal government if you're a 9/11 first responder, worker, resident, or a student in the area. If you fall into one of those categories and you want some more information on it, you can visit ny.gov/September 11 and find out more information if you might be eligible for that. Okay. The board is building a new business information system. It's called Onboard. We have a website set up for it, wcb.ny.gov/onboard. There's a walkthrough of that registration process. There's video tutorials and other pre-recorded presentations if you want to take a look at that. You can get real-time claim status, some online self-service features, as well as forms on our Onboard site. Okay. As with most businesses, or government agencies today, we are on social media. X, formerly known as Twitter. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a YouTube channel where this presentation is available. I know it's Helena's recording it today for you guys, but we also have other presentations available on our YouTube channel from other departments within the board. Our advocate for injured workers, he has a couple presentations out there. So there's some claims presentations, etc. So if you want to go to our YouTube channel and see what we have to offer, you're welcome to do so. We're also on LinkedIn. And if you'd like, you can sign up for notifications from us through email. If you go on to that notifications, wcb.ny.gov, and put that in, you can sign up for notifications that might interest you, whether it's from an employer's perspective, an injured worker's perspective, a claims perspective, etc. So we're not, bombarding your email inbox with emails. You can just choose, the subject matter that you are interested in, and we will send you out periodic updates or changes under those particular subject matters. Again, our office, the Advocate for Business office, we're a small office. There's 5 of us, led by our Advocate for Business, Anthony Tomaselli. We're there Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. So if you call us, somebody will pick up the phone. If you call after hours, you can leave a message. We'll get back to you the next day. Our number is 518-486-3331. You can also email us at any time, advocatebusiness@wcb.ny.gov. And we have our own section of the website where a lot of this material that we discussed today is located at wcb.ny.gov/AFB. That about wraps up what we have today. Again, thanks for spending this last 40 or so minutes with us. And Helena, thank you for having us. If you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat. We have more than enough time to get to all your questions. So I'd be happy to answer anything that you might have.
What a great presentation, a lot of great information. Quick question for you. It is being recorded, but people have been asking, well, you send me the PowerPoint presentation so I can send it to them? Or
yes, we will send you a PDF of the slide deck.
Okay.
And then you can distribute it out to anyone that, is interested in it.
So if you're on, you have to email me, Helena. I'll put my name in. A lot of people spell it wrong, but I'll put my requested by email. Question: what would an intern without compensation? What an intern without compensation for part-time service, I guess, would qualify. So do interns qualify for workman's comp?
So if you have an intern, okay, maybe you're hiring an intern for the summer, or you want your son or daughter to help out within the family business, you're not going to pay that individual. They would qualify for workers' comp. Essentially, they're getting something of value. We don't look at whether the individual, if it's a for-profit business, we don't look at whether that individual is being paid or not. We look at, are they receiving something of value? So yes, the interns are covered. If the business has coverage, so if the business has a workers' compensation insurance policy and they hire an intern, or they get a big job and they hire 10 people, everybody would be covered from the moment they're hired, one, as long as that business has a policy in place. So it's not a situation where you're going to add an intern to some employees you already have. You don't have to call your insurance carrier. It's not like health insurance, say, hey, I need a family plan or I need an individual plan. If you get a big job for your business and you hire a bunch of people, you have a policy in place, all those individuals are covered under that policy right away. But yes, to answer that question, interns are eligible for benefits and they do need to be covered under workers' compensation law.
What is required review during a workman's comp audit?
Generally, the insurance carrier, they do those audits on an annual basis. Some carriers come right to your place of business. Some you do it right online. But as far as what's required, they will let you know that the documentation that they're looking for ahead of time. Generally, they want to look at your payroll because they want to see they estimate your premium that initial year. You're almost always at a 1 year lag because you say, okay, I'm going to have X amount of payroll and of this type of payroll, X amount of this type of payroll. And then if you had a really busy year, you brought on some extra help, et cetera, you had made more payroll than you anticipated, they would charge you more premium the year going forward. If you had less, they would offer you some type of premium credit going forward. So they will let you know all that documentation that you need to have to perform that audit ahead of time.
Where do you get the paperwork to, like, the posters to hang up?
So the posters are issued only by the insurance carrier. So they
Insurance.
should send you that at the beginning of your policy year in the packet. It should be in there. It's Form C-105. If you didn't receive it or you don't have it, you want to make sure that you do get that from them. That's important because our investigators do sweeps from time to time, and they look for that poster. There is a penalty if you don't have that poster, hanging in your workplace. So that is issued by the insurance carrier.
Okay. Sal Rosenberg, I think you should just email those specific questions that I didn't get to advocatebusiness@wcb.ny.gov. Walter, he's asking for specific stuff that I think should be going straight to you.
Yeah, that's fine. Just email our office at any time or give us a call and we'll be happy to help you.
If a corporate business occasionally employs a temporary secretary who works sporadically in less than 30 days in a given quarter, 2 to 3 days in a row, or maybe not, do I have to pay workers' comp and disability insurance?
Well, workers' comp is a day one insurance. So regardless of whether the individual works 1 day for you for 2 hours, you would need to have the workers' comp in place. The disability benefits, it's 30 days in a calendar year. So, if they're going to work less than 30 days in a calendar year, you do not need the disability benefits.
Oh, good. Okay. Any other? You got the questions. Ask the questions now. You have the perfect person to answer these. That's why we put these on. Okay. Any other questions? I think you answered everything. I'm just gonna double check. You went over 1099. You answered that. People are
Yeah, and just to reiterate, so we don't look at whether you pay the individual on a 1099, even if you pay them under the table or, you work out some type of trade or something like that. That doesn't determine whether an employee is necessarily an employee for workers' compensation purposes. If they're materially participating in your business and it's the same type of business, like a restaurant can't hire a cook and pay him on a 1099 and say that individual is not their employee. That doesn't, preclude you from having workers' comp. If they're materially participating in the business, they would be considered to be an employee of your business for workers' compensation purposes.
definitely look at those check boxes, 1099 or an employee. Quick question. If an employee is on workers' comp and never come back, what do they do?
Well, I mean, they need to have a doctor's note to be out, right? So, if the doctor never releases them back to work, they would continue to collect benefits for, for as long as they're out of work under that injury.
Okay, good. Then get it. Hold on. If a contractor and work of promises, it if it is a contractor and a work of promises, are we still responsible?
Could you restate that question? Whoever put that in, I'm not sure I'm understanding it.
Berthany, if you can elaborate on that question. Let's see. Everyone's saying it's a great presentation. Thank you, thank you,
Oh,
thank you.
thanks so much. Yeah, we're happy to do it.
We love this. Um, if they do not work in the office.
Okay, so that's a good question. Like nowadays with a lot of remote workers, work from home, etc. They're still considered to be employees. So if you have a worker that works from home, if that individual develops carpal tunnel while they're working from home, or they are going to get something at the printer, and they trip, that would be considered a workers' compensation injury. If they're walking downstairs to get their lunch or get a snack, not workers' comp. But yeah, if they develop some type of injury or have some type of injury or illness during remote work in New York State, they would still be considered to be a workers' comp injury. That's a really good question. We've been getting that a lot lately. Obviously, since COVID, a lot of businesses and employees are going remote.
Um, and she also asked about if they do not work with a 1099.
So if they don't work in the office and you're paying them on 1099, it depends. If they're in the same type of business, like if you're making widgets and they're selling widgets for you, but you pay them only on a commission, they make up their own schedule, et cetera, they are still considered to be an employee for workers' comp because they're integral to the success of your business. Okay. Or if you're a graphic designer and you farm out some of your work to another graphic designer, they're generally going to be considered to be your employee. Okay. Because probably, you're getting the job, maybe the job pays $5,000. You're going to pay the graphic designer 4,000 of that 5,000, take a little bit for yourself. They would be considered to be an employee. It's the same type of work, that you have.
Yeah, you know what? It must be like opening up a huge different avenue is when you had mentioned that if you have remote workers and they are employees and they say that they're injured in their house, how do you determine whether they were on the job or, hey, I'm
Right.
gonna go get a
Yeah.
milkshake?
Right. Well, yeah, because the disability benefits, the off the job injuries pay doesn't pay nearly as well as the workers' comp. But yeah, that would be determined. That's a tough one, but that would be up to like the doctor, and then
Yep.
eventually maybe a workers' comp law judge if the insurance carrier said, "Geez, what we're you burned yourself on your stove. Like, how is that a workers' comp injury when you're you know doing data entry from home? So that would be up to them to kind of. We've also had, it might not be so relevant to this group, but now a lot of people, whether they're headquartered in New Jersey or Pennsylvania or what have you, they get an employee that moves to New York, that's 100% remote. They need to have coverage in New York State, in addition to whatever they have in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, et cetera. So, if you are a business and you're domiciled here in New York, but you have employees, or one of your employees is totally remote, and that individual happens to move to Vermont for some reason, you should check with the state of Vermont and see what their laws are, because if it's an out of state company and they have that employee in New York, they need New York coverage. So you have to be careful. Like a lot of times with the remote workforce, people don't know where their employees are, right? They don't even, you're not mailing them a paycheck, even. It's all direct deposit, et cetera. So, if you're a business that falls into that category where you have remote workers and they may or may not be in New York State, check with those other states.
So true, so true. Good information. New business hiring employer. What's the training period? Good question.
If a new,
If you have a new hire and they're
Mhm.
training, you have to have them for workers' comp from day one,
That's
correct?
yeah. Once you hire that individual, if they're in a training program, they're considered to be an employee. They're under your direction and control, right? You're telling them, hey, come in, you've come for this training program. Yep. They're considered an employee. Mhm. Yeah, from
Good
day
question.
one. And it's no matter how long they work, whether it's 2 hours every Monday or, 70 hours a week, they have to be covered.
Wow. Any other question? These are good questions, everyone.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Walter, thank you so much for your
Oh, thank
time.
you
We
guys.
so appreciate this. I'd like to do this back in the fall in case there's
Okay.
any updates.
Yep.
This would be great. It's so very informative and especially for the small businesses that don't have access to this and they might
Yep.
not have an HR department to guide
Right.
them with this. That's why I so appreciate, you and Nicole, partnering with the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce to get this information out. So we so appreciate your time on this.
Yes, thank you for having us. Thank you everybody for attending. And if you, Helene, if your group ever has any type of like expo or tabling event, we'd be happy to come and attend that and have an informational table and talk to your membership, hand out some stuff. We always bring some good tchotchke items too with us. But we'd be happy to help educate you guys that way if you had some type of expo or
Yeah,
we do that with a lot of the chambers. When they do hold their annual events, et cetera. So just contact myself or Nicole, and we'd be more than happy to set that up.
definitely. Everyone, I think it's going to be September 17th. So mark your calendars. We'll let you know. We're finalizing the date and the location. So, everyone, thank you so much. Next Wednesday, a week from yesterday, May 20th, is our World Trade Cocktail Reception. So, if you're looking for an in person networking, and you want to meet ambassadors, economic consuls to all the consulates and dignitaries throughout the New York City area, join us. We're going to have it's a cocktail reception, networking, and we're going to present a couple of fun awards. So join us on Wednesday. Also, this Tuesday, online networking, no matter where you are in the world or, at home. Join us 10 to 11. It's online networking. Everyone gets a copy of the chat and the list of attendees. It's a great way to grow your business. If you're not a member of the chamber, please join us. We can put you in front of 30,000 different business and civic leaders. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us one day away from a weekend. Very excited about that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And Walter put his the advocate business at wcb.ny.gov .gov. So
Yep.
take a screenshot of that. If you have any questions, Mirka, thank you so much. We are the best chamber because we are greater. No, just kidding. All chambers are really good. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Have a
Thank
great
you, Elena.
day.
Have a great day.